There were two things everyone at Aldrin Logistics knew about Cormac Aldrin. He never raised his voice, and he never had to. I figured that out in my first week, watching him end a shipping dispute with nothing more than a quiet word and a look that made a vendor twice his age apologize 4 times before leaving the conference room. I filed it away alongside the other things I'd learned not to examine too closely in my 2.5 years there. The cars that idled too long in the parking garage, the meetings that appeared on no official calendar, the way certain phone calls cleared the hallway without anyone being asked. The logistics company was real. The freight contracts were legitimate. The revenue substantial. The books I kept meticulous and clean. There was a shadow layer underneath all of it, and I'd made a quiet professional decision not to look at it directly. What I looked at instead were spreadsheets, quarterly reconciliations, the accounts receivable that had earned me a promotion 18 months in, and a salary that finally let me pay down my graduate school loans. That was all I needed from Cormac Aldrin. That's what I told myself anyway. My phone vibrated against the desk. Sawyer's pattern. 3 buzzes, pause. 3 more, like he thought urgency was a rhythm you could teach someone. "Where did you go for lunch today?" I typed back without pulling my eyes from the monitor. "The sandwich place downstairs, same as always." "With who?" Not a question, never a question anymore. "Priscilla from HR, her team had a thing, I went for 20 minutes. The 3 dots appeared, pulsed, disappeared, appeared again. "Her brother works near your building." I put the phone face down on the desk and stared at the invoice on my screen until the numbers stopped making sense. Priscilla's brother was a physical therapist in Streeterville, who I had never met, and whose existence had somehow become evidence of something in Sawyer's mind. The same way my coworker's birthday party had been evidence, the same way a delayed train had been evidence, the same way everything had become evidence of something I wasn't doing. Delaney. Mr. Aldrin was in the doorway of his office. He moved quietly. The whole building seemed to rearrange itself around him without complaint. And he was looking at my phone, then at my face, with the particular attention he gave things he'd already decided mattered. "You've been on that same line item for 45 minutes, he said. "Almost through it. Go home. The quarterly close can wait one morning. The auditors want." "Delaney." The gentleness in it landed harder than sharpness would have. "Go home, and if you ever need anything, it doesn't matter when, you call me, you understand?" I understood. I just didn't know what to do with it. "Thank you, Mr. Aldrin. I'm fine, really." He didn't believe me. I could see it in the way he stayed in the doorway, a beat too long before stepping back. I gathered my things with hands that weren't quite steady, and I went home. Sawyer was in the kitchen when I got there, which was new. He usually came back late, smelling like whiskey and whatever grievance had accumulated since morning. Early was worse. Early meant he'd had time to build a case. "You said you were alone," he said without turning from the counter. "I said I was with Priscilla." "You said the sandwich place. You didn't say Priscilla." "Sawyer, I texted you exactly what happened." He turned. The jaw was set, the eyes too bright, the careful control doing its usual work of pretending to be reason. He'd been charming once, genuinely, disarmingly charming. A cybersecurity consultant with good ideas and a better laugh. The kind of person who made you feel like you were the most interesting thing in the room. That version of him had started disappearing around month 8, replaced gradually, incrementally, by this one. "Her brother's gym is 2 blocks from your office," he said. I've never been to her brother's gym. How would I know that? Because I'm telling you. I set my bag down carefully, reading the room the way I'd learned to. 4 empty beer cans on the counter. Not good. "We have been over Priscilla's brother before, Sawyer. He is a physical therapist. I have never spoken to him. There is nothing there." "And Aldrin." My stomach tightened. "He's my employer." "He watches you." Sawyer moved toward me slowly, the way people do when they want you to understand they're not in a hurry. "I've seen it. You think I don't know what that means?" "I think you've convinced yourself of something that isn't real." I took a step back, and I think we need to stop having this conversation, because we've had it 30 times and it goes nowhere. He crossed the distance between us in 2 strides. His hands closed around my wrists with the particular grip he'd developed over the past few months. Hard enough to hold, careful enough to leave marks that could be explained away. I'd explained them away 3 times already. To myself, mostly. "You are mine," he said, low, certain, like he was reminding himself more than me. "I have been patient, Delaney. I have been so patient with you, and you stand here and lie to my face about where you were and who you were with. You're hurting my wrists, Sawyer. Let go. When you stop lying." "I am not lying," I tried to pull free. His grip tightened. "Let go of me right now." His hand came up fast. I saw it. I had enough time to know what was happening, and then the world tilted sideways, my ear ringing, my cheek burning with a heat that spread up into my temple, and we were both completely still. I'd thought about this moment, hypothetically, in the way you think about car accidents. What if, could it happen? What would I do? I'd told myself I would scream, or fight, or call for help. What I actually did was look at him with absolute clarity and say, very quietly, "Get out." He tried to explain. He tried to apologize. He reached for my arm, and I stepped back and told him that if he touched me again, I would call 911 before he got to the door, and something in my voice, the part that had gone somewhere cold and far away, made him believe me. The door closed. I sank to the floor. I sat there for a long time with my back against the wall, and my face throbbing and my phone in my hand. I scrolled past my sister in Portland, past friends who had slowly, quietly vanished over 2 years of Sawyer, making himself the center of everything, past contacts I'd let go dormant because it was easier than explaining. I scrolled until I found a number I'd saved 18 months ago, after Mr. Aldrin had handed me his card during a building evacuation drill and said, without any particular emphasis, "This isn't just for office emergencies." At the time, I'd thought it was an odd thing to say. I pressed call. He answered on the second ring. Delaney, no sleep in his voice, no confusion, immediate and fully present. What happened? Just hearing my name like that, like I was the only thing he was thinking about, broke something loose in my chest. "He knows where I sleep," I said, and my voice came out a whisper. "I don't know who else to call. Can you please come get me?" Half a second of silence that had weight to it. "Address," he said. I gave it to him. "Lock everything. Deadbolt and chain. Stay on the phone." I heard movement in the background. "Keys. I'm 15 minutes away." "Okay," I made it to the door, engaged both locks, slid back down the wall. "Okay, it's locked." "Good." His voice had changed, settled into something deliberate and cold, like a decision had been made, and everything now was just execution. "Talk to me. Tell me what happened." "We fought. It's been getting worse for months, and tonight I pressed my free hand to my cheek. "He hit me. I made him leave, but I don't know if he'll stay gone, and I can't." I stopped. Started again. "I'm sorry to call you like this." "Don't apologize for that." Then quieter, in a tone I'd never heard from him before. "Who are your wrists?" "Bruised, I think. He grabbed me before." The silence that followed felt like a temperature drop. When he spoke again, it was measured, controlled, the voice of someone who had made a decision he would not be revisiting. "Pack enough for a few days. You're not staying there tonight." He arrived in 12 minutes. He came with a man I recognized from the parking garage, Dex, broad and quiet, who stationed himself outside my door while Cormac came in. His eyes went to my wrists first, then my face, and his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He didn't say anything dramatic. He picked up my bag. "Let's go," he said. "My car's outside." He lived in a building in River North that had a lobby made of marble and deliberate quiet, the kind of place where the doorman knew better than to ask questions. His penthouse was all clean lines and city light, and he set me up in a guest suite larger than my living room, without making me feel small for needing it. Dr. Kaminsky arrived within the hour, silver-haired, efficient, hands that documented everything with quiet, clinical precision. She photographed the bruising, noted the contusion on my cheek, left me with ibuprofen and the suggestion that I sleep if I could. Later, I found Cormac at the window with a glass of whiskey, his jacket gone, looking like a version of himself that didn't require armor. "Thank you," I said, "for coming." "Don't thank me for that." He didn't turn. You thanking me for basic decency just tells me how low he set the bar. I stood beside him and looked at the city and let that sit. I should file a police report, I said. Yes. Not tonight. Also yes, he looked at me when you're ready, not before. That was all, no pressure, no persuasion. Just when you're ready, like the timeline belonged to me. I went to bed and thought about how different that was from what I'd gotten used to. In the morning, I found 22 missed calls from Sawyer, and a text thread that started with apologies and ended with something that bordered on a threat. You think Aldrin is going to protect you? I know what he is. I screenshotted the whole thing and sent it to myself. Then I opened my banking app. The joint account Sawyer had suggested we open 10 months ago, just to make the bills easier to manage. It makes sense, it's practical. Had a balance of $63. My last 2 paychecks had transferred out in small increments. $50 here, $200 there, amounts designed not to trigger an alert. The receiving accounts were ones I'd never seen. I pulled up my credit report. 3 credit cards opened in my name that I hadn't applied for. A personal loan for $18,000, delinquent since spring. Another for $12,000, already in collections. My credit score, which I'd spent 6 careful years building to 774, had collapsed to 528. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. The anger that came wasn't hot or frantic. It was cold and exact, the kind that knows what it wants to do and is willing to be patient about doing it. I called Cormac. He answered before the first ring finished. He stole from me, I said. Sawyer opened accounts in my name. He took out $30,000 in loans. I've been looking at my credit report, and there are cards I didn't open, collections I didn't know about. Don't touch anything else. I'm on my way back. A pause. Did you sign these applications? No. Then it's forgery. Paper trails don't lie, darlin'. We'll use his. He was back in 40 minutes, and he sat across from me while I walked him through every account, every transfer, every fraudulent line. He asked his questions. Did you authorize this? Did you sign this? And when I finished, something in his expression had gone very still. We're getting a lawyer today, he said, and you're filing a police report. He'll say I knew, that I'm inventing this to get out of the debt. Let him say it. We'll let the handwriting analysis answer. He met my eyes. Tell me you want to fight him on this. I thought about the $18,000 loan financing, whatever Sawyer had decided he deserved. I thought about my collapsed credit score. I thought about the bruise on my face. I want to destroy him, I said, by the book, completely. Cormac almost smiled. Then let's get to work. The lawyer's name was Philip Rhea, and he had the specific confidence of someone who didn't take cases he couldn't win. He connected me with Carol Brandt, a fraud investigator with tired eyes and an organized mind, and I spent the next 3 months building a case that left no gaps. I documented every fraudulent account, cross-referenced every transfer against my pay stubs, my work calendar, my email records to establish that I'd been at the office when the online applications were submitted from Sawyer's IP address. I organized it all into a timeline so thorough that Carol looked up from it during our second meeting and said I was wasted in logistics. I also filed a restraining order through the Cook County Court. Sawyer was prohibited from coming within 500 feet of me, my workplace, or the building where I'd been staying. He violated it twice by phone before his attorney got involved. The second time he called, I was at my new apartment, a 1-bedroom in Lincoln Park that I'd signed a lease on 6 weeks after leaving mine, and his number appeared on my screen at 11 at night. I let it go to voicemail. He left 4 minutes of alternating apology and accusation, and I forwarded the audio file to Detective Soria and Philip Rhea before going to bed. I also started going to a self-defense class on Tuesday evenings. A woman named Britt ran it in a training gym near Fullerton. Practical, physical, no performance required. The first time I broke a wrist hold, I stood in the center of the mat, breathing hard, and felt something come back into my body that I hadn't realized I'd given away. And I called Portia. She'd found me through a message on Instagram in the second week, a short paragraph from someone I didn't know. I think you might be going through something I went through 2 years ago. I have documentation if it would help. No pressure. She'd dated Sawyer for 8 months before I met him. He'd opened 2 credit cards in her name and drained a checking account she'd shared with him. She'd spent 14 months working with a consumer protection attorney to clear the debt. She testified before the grand jury. Sawyer was indicted on 4 counts of identity theft, 2 counts of wire fraud, 1 count of criminal impersonation. His bail was set at $75,000, which his parents paid. He was ordered to surrender his passport and check in weekly with his pretrial officer. I signed my own apartment lease the morning after the indictment came down. The trial lasted 4 days. I was on the witness stand for nearly 2 hours, and I told the truth, clearly and without embellishment, while Sawyer's defense attorney tried to suggest I'd authorized the applications and was now constructing a false narrative to escape the debt. I didn't waver. The handwriting analysis had come back definitive. The signatures weren't mine. The forensic accountant had traced every transfer. Portia's testimony had established a pattern that no single incident could have proven alone. The jury deliberated for 2.5 hours. Guilty on all counts. I walked out of the Daily Center into cold November wind and stood on the steps and breathed. The city went on around me, cabs and delivery bikes, and 2 pigeons fighting over a pretzel wrapper near the base of the stairs, and I just let it. Cormac was across the street by his car. He watched me come toward him without moving. Guilty, I said when I reached him. Everything. He exhaled once. Then he looked at me the way he had that first night. Careful, assessing, like he was confirming something he'd already suspected. Good, he said. I laughed. It came out rough and completely genuine. That's your whole reaction? I have more, but you look like you could use a meal before the rest of it. We walked to a restaurant 3 blocks away, a quiet place with good food and a corner booth, and we talked for 2 hours. I told him about Portia, about the self-defense class, about the Saturday morning sketching class I'd started, watercolors, architectural studies, things I'd given up 3 years ago, when Sawyer said the supplies took up too much space and the work wasn't worth the mess. You built all of that yourself, he said. You gave me somewhere to land first. Landing was yours. Everything after it was yours. He turned his wine glass slowly. There's a difference, Delaney. I looked at him across the table. This man I'd worked for, watched from a careful professional distance, refused to think about too directly for 2.5 years, and something settled into place with a quietness that surprised me. Can I ask you something? I said. Yes. Why do you call me darlin'? The faintest shift in his expression. Almost a smile, the real kind he kept mostly private. Because the first week you worked for me, you walked in with your coffee and your color-coded folders, and that particular look like you were about to solve every problem in the building by noon, and I thought. He paused. I thought, there she is, and I didn't have a better word for it. I sat with that for a moment. I've been thinking about what I want, I said. And I want to stay at Aldrin. The work is mine, and I'm good at it. I held his gaze. I also want to stop pretending I haven't been choosing you in my head for longer than I've admitted to myself. I want to do it out loud instead. Then do it, he said, simply, like he'd been waiting for me to find my way to that sentence, and was prepared to wait as long as it took. I'm not doing this because you came for me, I said. I need you to know that. I know. He reached across the table and covered my hand with his. I know exactly who you are, Delaney. You built your case, you faced him in court, you got your own apartment, you sold a painting. He squeezed once. You don't owe me anything. This is just what it is. What is it? Something I've been careful about for 2.5 years. His thumb moved across my knuckles. Something I'd like to stop being careful about, if you're sure. I'm sure, I said. The sentencing came 6 weeks later. 4 to 6 years on the fraud and identity theft charges combined, restitution ordered for Portia and for me. The fraudulent accounts would be formally disputed and removed from my credit report over the following months, a slow administrative undoing of everything Sawyer had constructed in my name. I didn't go to the sentencing. I sent Philip Rhea in my place, and I spent that morning at my kitchen table painting. Really painting, For the first time in years without the background hum of someone else's opinion about whether it was worth my time. The piece I made that day was mostly blue. Lake blue, the color of February on Lake Michigan, when the sky and water blur at the horizon. I propped it against the wall when it dried and stood back and thought, yes, that's right. It felt like a recovery of something I hadn't known, was missing until I got it back. Dating Cormac was nothing like what I'd had with Sawyer. Where Sawyer had needed constant proof of my loyalty, Cormac was secure in a way that came from inside rather than from surveillance. Where Sawyer had narrowed my world until I couldn't see the edges anymore, Cormac actively pushed mine outward. Asked about Priscilla, asked about Portia, asked about the sketching instructor I'd mentioned once in passing. He remembered details and asked follow-up questions, and treated my life like something worth being curious about. He also didn't pretend his world was clean. He told me carefully and completely what Aldrin Logistics actually was underneath the freight manifests and customs paperwork. He didn't romanticize it. I didn't pretend it was simple. I had enough information to make a real choice, which was more than I'd had with Sawyer, who had been perfectly ordinary on the surface and constructed something criminal underneath. I chose Cormac with clear eyes. 5 months after the trial, he asked me to meet him at the penthouse on a Tuesday evening in April, when the city smelled like rain and the lake had gone soft and silver at the edges of visibility. I'd been there dozens of times by then, and I knew the view from his windows the way I knew my own neighborhood. But something about the way he looked at me when I came in made me go still in the entryway. He crossed to me slowly. "There's something I've been thinking about," he said. "Okay." He reached into his jacket pocket and opened a small box. The ring inside was a sapphire, deep blue-green, almost teal, the color I'd been drawn to in my paintings for months without fully understanding why. "Delaney Marie Penn," he said, and then he stopped, took a breath, started again with more intention. "I have watched you walk into that building for 2.5 years and make it run better than it had any right to. I watched you sit on the floor of a ruined life and decide to build something better out of it, piece by piece, without asking anyone's permission. I watched you become more yourself every month until I couldn't pretend that what I feel for you is anything less than what it is." He looked up. "I love you. I want to spend whatever comes next proving you chose well. Will you marry me?" I was crying before he finished. The good kind, the kind that doesn't feel like losing anything. "Yes," I said, "Cormac, 1,000 times yes." He slid the ring onto my finger and stood up and pulled me in, and I pressed my face against his shoulder and just breathed. The city went on outside the glass, indifferent and enormous and beautiful, and I felt, for the first time in so long I'd forgotten the texture of it, genuinely, completely at peace. Not the peace of hiding, not the peace of surviving, the peace of choosing and being chosen, freely, by someone who had seen all of it and stayed. Later, lying in the dark with the ring catching the ambient glow of the skyline, I thought about the woman who'd sat on her apartment floor 9 months ago, with a bruised face and a shaking hand, scrolling to a number she'd saved just in case. She'd made one phone call, she'd told the truth, she'd gathered her own evidence, stood in her own witness box, signed her own lease, painted her own walls blue. Everything that came after that, the ring, the man, the life expanding quietly outward in every direction, she'd earned with her own hands. That felt like exactly the right place to begin.